Let's say this is my pinch pot that I've decided I'm going to also carve. Now, this doesn't necessarily need to be carved. It would work as your pinch pot. I want to explain what carving isn't for this project. If I take a small tool and I draw something, let's just say I draw something through the surface, this is a kind of carving. But it's really just surface decoration because I haven't changed the form at all. All I've done is adjusted the way the surface looks. So this is not the kind of carving that I want you to do for this project. It's also a good idea to select your tools with carving by hand in mind. A tool like this, loop tool, is typically used on the potter's wheel to trim a foot while the pot is spinning on the potter's wheel. While you can use this tool to carve, it isn't the easiest tool to control using it by hand. So my recommendation is to use all the other tools, and we'll use these when we get to throwing on the potter's wheel. This little bowl is fairly even in thickness. There are no real thick spots. It is possible to consider scraping the surface, refining the thickness to be a kind of carving if you adjust the thickness. If you just scrape a little bit off the surface, it doesn't really work for this assignment. So if I just do this, I suppose it's removing some material, but it isn't really carving. The goal here is to remove material in a way that changes the weight, the feel, the way it feels in your hand perhaps. And so a tool like this, if I scrape all around the inside of this piece and make it lighter, I would consider this to be carving. Even though I'm not changing the form significantly, I'm changing the presence or the feel in your hand. So I can take this piece, which is fairly even and fairly thin, and refine the form by scraping. We'll get to other kinds of carving or removing material in a moment. I think you get the idea. I'm not really adding any texture or changing anything other than the weight and balance. And I may choose to just carve one side and leave the textures on the outside if I would like. How you approach carving is completely up to you, and the goal here really is to experiment. This foot, I think, needs a little bit more definition, so I want it to change more dramatically. And there are a few ways to do this, but one way would be to carve it. And I may just make a little adjustment here by carving the outside of the foot that I already formed through pinching methods. I'm really just using the knife as a paring tool. I'm just slicing away some of the material on the surface. And I'm using the curve of the knife to make the curve at the bottom of the bowl. So it's a little bit more defined, and I could do the same thing on the inside if I want. So this is carving to refine the form. I think that's a little better. A few more minutes work and I'll have a piece that is refined through carving methods. These tools are all made in the studio here, and they're based on the idea of this tool that's from Japan. One edge is curved and one edge is straight, and many potters in Japan in the Far East use these tools to trim on the potter's wheel as well as to carve with. These are our version of these carving tools, made out of strapping steel. We also have a bunch that are knives that have been bent into different profiles. So you should experiment and find what kind of tools you like using. The most common tool to carve with would be a knife, and we have a rusty one and a shiny one. I would always choose the rusty knife because the clay doesn't stick to it as well. Also, here's just a sharpened piece of wood that I can use as a knife. These tools work at different stages of the clay hardness. So this is a fluting tool, which would be used for leather hard clay, a cheese cutter, leather hard clay, straight out of your kitchen. In wire tools are used with softer clay. These are carving tools, although they don't look like it.